This is my audition tape to be Grey's Anatomy. I will be a new character on Grey's Anatomy. Okay, I think I'm going to be a. I think it's pretty likely that I shall be a new character on Grey's Anatomy. That I shall write into the script. And in preparation for this new role that I plan on taking on, I'm going to try to. What I want to do is I want to gain the skills of a doctor. I want to educate myself in a way where I'm fully qualified to be a doctor. I have all the medical acumen, skills, preparation, training. It's kind of like a self-taught doctor. And so that way, if I was a new character in Grey's Anatomy, not only would I write my character into their script and their existing script, but what I would also do is I would have all the merit, qualifications, skill set, and acumen of a real doctor. So that I would think that would be kind of like a really a bonus that I would. So in this first episode that I would write, that would be like a new like teacher who teaches medical students on the Grey's Anatomy. Good morning, class. I'm Dr. Now I got to think of a doctor's name. What if I was a doctor? What doctor? What would the name? Let's see. My name would be Doctor. I'm trying to think of a funny doctor's name. Um, Dr. Beach Titties or something. Okay, let me get my Grey's Anatomy down. Okay. The female organs of generation, the external organs. The external organs of generation of the female are the mons veneris, the labia majora and minora, the clitoris, the meatus urinaris, the orifice of the vagina. The term vulva or pendulum is generally applied, includes all these parts. The mona venerea is the rounded eminence in front of the pubic symphysis, formed by a collection of fatty tissue beneath the integument. It becomes covered with hair at the time of puberty. The labia majora, let's see, okay. Wait, I want to find something about the breasts. So okay, let me see. The ovaries. Wait a minute. The mammary glands. Okay. The mammae, or breasts, secrete the milk and are accessory glands of the generative system. Now, this is weird. They exist in the male as well as in the female. But in the former, only in the rudimentary state, unless their growth is excited by peculiar circumstances. In the female, they are the two large hemispherical eminences situated toward the lateral aspect of the pectoral region, corresponding to the intervals between the third and sixth or seventh ribs, and extending from the side of the sternum to the axilla. Their weight and dimensions differ at different periods of life and in different individuals. Okay. They increase during pregnancy and especially after delivery and become atrophied in old age. The left mamma is generally considered a little larger than the right. Their base is nearly circular, flattened, or slightly concave, and has its long diameter directed upward and outward towards the axilla. They are separated from the pectoral muscles by a layer of fascia. The outer surface of the mamma is convex and presents just below the center a small conical prominence. The nipple, mamilla. The surface of the nipple is dark colored and surrounded by an areola having a colored tint. In the version, the areola is of a delicate rosy hue. About the second month after impregnation, it enlarges and acquires a darker tinge, which increases as pregnancy advances, becoming in some cases of a dark brown or even black color. This color diminishes as soon as lactation is over, but is entirely lost throughout life. These changes in the color of the areola are of importance in the forming of a conclusion in the case of a suspected first pregnancy. The nipple is cylindrical or conical eminence, capable of undergoing a sort of okay. Okay, let me see. Let's see. Should talk about the bones. Let me see. How about the skull? Should I talk about the skull? Let's see. Let's talk about the eye. Okay. I'm going to start at the beginning. Okay. Okay. Let's see. Where's it? Okay. The eye. The eyeball is contained in the cavity of the orbit. And this situation is securely protected from injury, whilst its position is such as to ensure the most extensive range of sight. So this kind of makes me wonder if human evolution continues at the rate that it's on. Do you think that in some point in the future that the human form will have evolved into a being that can see peripherally, and we could actually have like 360-degree vision, seeing that, like when they say that old slogan, I mean that old people used to say somebody has eyes in the back of their head. Do you think it's possible that human evolution could be actually ever get to the point where we actually have 360-degree peripheral vision, or even that we could see beyond the boundaries of time and space, or that we could see like clairvoyance, that we could actually not only see in the outer world that we inhabit, the concrete material reality, but beyond the veil of like material reality into like the kind of like inner space. There's outer space and there's inner space. Do you think the human form will ever evolve to not only see peripherally, but actually see into inner space and actually see, some of the archetypal figures that are motivating our earthly behaviors, and somehow kind of like be able to um, travel back and forth between the two sides of the reality of existence. If I put more time into that, I'd probably think of a much more eloquent way to state that. But okay. It is acted upon by the numerous muscles by which it is capable of being directed to different parts. It is supplied by vessels and nerves, and is additionally protected in front by several appendages, such as the eyebrow, eyelids, etc. The eyeball is embedded in the fat of the orbit, but is surrounded by a thin membranous sac, the capsule of tenon, which isolates it so as to allow it free movement. The capsule of tenon consists of a thin membrane which envelops the eyeball from the optic nerve to the ciliary region. Um, okay, let's see. Separating it from the orbital fat and forming a sac in which it plays. Its inner surface is smooth and is in contact with the outer surface of the sclerotic. The perisclerotic lymph space only intervening. The lymph space is continuous with the subdural and subarachnoid spaces. It is transversed by delicate bands of connective tissue which extend between the capsule and the sclerotic. The capsule is perforated behind the ciliary vessels and nerves, and by the optic nerve being continuous with the sheath of the latter. In front, it blends with the ocular conjunctiva, and with it is attached to the ciliary region of the eyeball. It's perforated by the muscles which move the eyeball and and IH ascends a tubular sheath. The sheath of the superior oblique is carried as far as the fibrous pulley of that muscle, that on the inferior oblique reaches as far as the floor of the orbit, to which it gives off a slip. The sheaths on the recti are generally lost in the perimysium, but they give off important expansions. The expansion from the superior rectus blends with the tendon of the levator palpebrae. That of the inferior rectus is attached to the inferior tarsal plate. These two recti, therefore, will exercise some influence in the orbits of the eyelids. The expansions from the sheaths of the internal and external recti are strong, especially the ones from the lateral muscles, and are attached to the lacrimal and malar bones, respectively. As they probably check the action of these two recti, they have been named the internal and external cheek ligaments. Lockwood has also described a thickening in the lower part of the capsule of the tenon, which he has named the suspensory ligament of the eye. It is slung like a hammock below the eyeball, being expanded in the center and narrow at its extremities, which are attached to the malar and lacrimal bones, respectively. The eyeball is composed of segments of two spheres of different sizes. The anterior segment is one of a small sphere and forms about 1/6 of the eyeball. Is prominent from the posterior segment, which is one much larger sphere and forms a 5/6 of the globe. The segment, the segment of the larger sphere is opaque and formed by the sclerotic, the tunic of the protection of the eyeball. The smaller sphere is transparent and formed by the cornea. The term anterior pole is applied to the central part of the anterior curvature of the eyeball, and that of the posterior pole, the central point of the posterior curvature. A line joining the two pole forms to its sagittal axis. The axes of the eyeballs are nearly parallel and therefore do not correspond to the axes of the orbits, which are directed outward. The optic nerve follows the direction of the axis and orbits and are therefore not parallel and enters the eyeball from. Okay. I'll do one more section of this. Let's see. Let's go. Okay. The bone. Intramembranous ossification. In the case of bones which are developed in membrane, no cartilaginous mold precedes the appearance of the bone tissue. The membrane, which occupies the place of the future bone, is the nature of the connective tissue and ultimately forms the periosteum. The outer portion is more fibrous, while internally the cells or osteoblasts predominate. At this stage, it is seen to be composed of fibers and granule cells in the matrix. At the outset of the process of the bone formation, a little network of bony spiculi is first noticed radiating from the center of the ossification. When these rays or growing bones are examined with a microscope, they are found to consist of, at their growing point, of a network of fine, clear fibers and granular corpuscles with an intervening ground substance. The fibers are termed osteogenetic fibers and are made up of the fine fibrils differing little from those of white fibrous tissue. Like them, they are probably deposited in the matrix through the influence of the cells, in this case, the osteoblasts. The osteogenetic fibers soon assume a dark and granular appearance from the deposition of calcareous granules in the fibers and in the intervening matrix. And they are, as they calcify, they are found in the enclosed found to enclose some of the granular corpuscles or osteoblasts. By the fusion of the calcareous granules, the bony tissue again assumes a more transparent appearance, but the fibers are no longer so distinctly seen. The involved osteoblasts from the corpuscles of the future bone, the spaces in which they are enclosed constituting the lacunae, and the osteogenic fibers grow out into periphery, they continue to calcify and give rise to the fresh bone spicules. Thus, a network of bone is formed, the meshes of which contain the blood vessels and a delicate connective tissue crowded with osteoblasts. The bony trabeculae, thickened by the addition of fresh layers of bone formed by the osteoblasts on their surface, and the meshes are correspondingly encroached upon. Subsequently, successive layers of bony tissue are deposited under the periosteum, periosteum, and round and larger vascular bones, which become Haversian canals, so that the bone increases much in thickness. Intracartilaginous ossification. Just before ossification begins, the bone is entirely cartilaginous, and in a long bone, which may be taken as an example, the process commences in the center and proceeds towards the extremities, which for some time remain cartilaginous. Subsequently, a similar process commences in one or more places in those extremities and gradually extends through them. The extremities do not, however, become joined to the shaft or bony tissue until growth has ceased, but are attached to it by a layer of cartilaginous tissue termed the Ephesial Cartilage. The first step in the ossification of the cartilage is that the cartilage cells at the point where ossification is commencing, and which is termed the center of ossification, enlarge and arrange themselves in rows. The matrix in which they are embedded intermission. Increases in quantity so that the cells become further separated from each other. A deposit of calcareous material now takes place in this matrix between the row of cells so that they become separated from each other by longitudinal columns of calcified matrix, presenting a granular and opaque appearance. Here and there, the matrix between the two cells of the same row also becomes calcified, and transverse bars of calcified substance stretch across from one calcareous column to another. Thus, there are longitudinal groups of the cartilage cells enclosed in the oblong cavities, the walls of which are formed of calcified matrix, which cuts all the nutrition from the cells, and they, in consequence, waste, leaving spaces called the primary areola. At the same time that this process is going on in the center of the solid bar of the cartilage of which the fetal bone consists, certain changes are taking place on its surface. This is covered by a very vascular membrane. The perichondrium, entirely similar to the embryonic connective tissue already described as constituting the basis of the membrane bone, on the inner surface of which, that is to say, on the surface in contact with the cartilage, are gathered the formative cells, the osteoblasts. By the agency of these cells, a thin layer of bony tissue is being formed between the perichondrium and the cartilage by the intramembranous intramembranous mode of ossification just described. There are then, in the first stage of ossification, two processes going on simultaneously. In the center of the cartilage, the formation of a number of oblong spaces formed of calcified matrix and containing the withered cartilage cells, and on the surface of the cartilage, in formation of a layer of true membrane bone. The second stage consists in the prolongation in the cartilage of the process of the deeper or osteogenetic layer of the perichondrium, which has now become periosteum. The processes consist of blood vessels and cells, osteoblasts or bone formers, and osteoclasts or bone destroyers. The latter are similar in the giant cells, myelioplaques found in marrow, and they excavate passages through the new formed bony layer by absorption and pass through it into the calcified matrix. Wherever these processes come in contact with the calcified walls of the primary areola, they absorb it, and thus cause a fusion of the original cavities and the formation of larger spaces, which are termed the secondary areolae or medullary spaces. And the secondary space of the original cartilage cells having disappeared become filled with embryonic marrow of the osteoblasts and vessels, and derived in the manner described above by the osteogenic layer of the periosteum. Or how do you pronounce that? Goodbye for now. I hope you join me next time for another live stream.